Is psychoanalysis real science, or is it just expensive therapy based on outdated ideas from over a century ago? This question has sparked heated debates in academic circles, online forums, and even dinner tables. Some swear by Freud's couch, while others dismiss the entire field as nothing more than pseudoscience dressed up in intellectual language. The truth is far more nuanced and fascinating than either side wants to admit. And understanding this debate reveals something profound about how we validate knowledge, how we understand the human mind, and why so many smart people can disagree so passionately about something that affects millions of lives. Let's start with a brutal truth that might surprise you. Psychoanalysis, as originally conceived by Sigmund Freud, is not science. But before you celebrate or despair, understand this doesn't automatically make it pseudoscience either. There's a critical difference, and grasping this distinction is essential to understanding the entire controversy. To understand why, we need to talk about a philosopher named Karl Popper, who lived during the same era as both Einstein and Freud. Popper introduced a revolutionary concept called falsifiability. Here's how it works. Imagine you have an enormous bag filled with hundreds of thousands of eggs. You can't see through the bag. You want to know if all the eggs inside are chicken eggs. One approach would be to pull out every single egg, examine it, and confirm it matches a chicken egg. But this would take forever, and in science, we almost never test every single member of a population. We use samples. Popper's brilliant insight was this. You cannot prove that all eggs are identical by examining samples, but you can prove they're not all identical if you find just one that's different. This is falsifiability. Science doesn't prove things are true. It tries to prove things are false. When something survives repeated attempts to disprove it, we gain confidence in it. This is fundamentally how modern science operates. Now, let's apply this to psychoanalysis. When Freud introduced concepts like the unconscious mind, the ID, ego, and superego, he was proposing structures that cannot be falsified. You cannot design an experiment to prove or disprove the existence of the superego. It's not a physical structure in the brain. It's a metaphorical construct, an intellectual framework for understanding human behavior. These foundational concepts of psychoanalysis must be assumed to exist for the theory to work. You can't test them. You can't falsify them. Therefore, by Popper's criteria, psychoanalysis is not science. But here's where it gets interesting. Not being science doesn't automatically make something worthless or wrong. Mathematics isn't science either, but it's incredibly useful. Philosophy isn't science, yet it's valuable. The real question is whether psychoanalysis is pseudoscience, and that's a completely different problem. Pseudoscience is something that has been falsified but continues to pretend it's scientifically valid, or something that uses scientific language to gain legitimacy while lacking any scientific foundation. Homeopathy is pseudoscience. Astrology is pseudoscience. These systems have been tested and failed, yet they persist by wrapping themselves in scientific-sounding terminology. Psychoanalysis occupies a more complex position. When Freud developed his theories at the turn of the 20th century, they were cutting edge. We didn't have modern neuroscience, brain imaging, or cognitive psychology. The concept of the unconscious mind was revolutionary. Before Freud, people didn't really think about hidden motivations or suppressed memories. His metaphors of ID, ego, and superego were the best available tools for describing mental phenomena that we couldn't yet measure or observe directly. But here's the critical problem. Science has advanced enormously in the past 100 years. Neuroscience, cognitive psychology, and behavioral studies have provided much better explanations for many phenomena that Freud described. Take childhood amnesia, the fact that none of us remember our first few years of life. Freud attributed this to repression, linking it to the Oedipus complex. Today, we know it's caused by neurogenesis, the natural development of new neural connections that effectively overwrites earlier memories. This happens around age 2 or 3, completely independent of psychological repression. When faced with better scientific explanations, psychoanalysis has a choice. It can update its concepts, integrate new knowledge, and evolve. Or it can cling to century-old texts and insist that Freud was right about everything. This is where psychoanalysis risks becoming pseudoscience. Not because its core ideas were wrong for their time, but because many practitioners refuse to update them in light of overwhelming evidence. The problem isn't psychoanalysis itself. The problem is psychoanalysts who study poorly, who treat Freud's writings like sacred texts rather than historical documents, who refuse to engage with neuroscience, genetics, or modern psychology. These practitioners create an insular world where questioning fundamental concepts is treated as heresy rather than healthy scientific skepticism. But there's hope. Some psychoanalysts have tried to bridge this gap. Wilfred Bion, for example, attempted to break down the rigid dualism that separates emotion from cognition in traditional psychoanalytic thinking. He proposed that psychoanalysis should be understood as a theory of learning, not about observable behavior, but about the experience of behavior. This is a subtle but crucial distinction. It's not about how you act, but about how you experience your actions, how you represent your experiences to yourself. Modern thinkers have built on this foundation, trying to integrate psychoanalytic insights with neuroscience and cognitive psychology. They recognize that concepts like ID, ego, and superego are useful metaphors, but they don't correspond to actual brain structures. They acknowledge that we now have better explanations for many phenomena Freud described. This approach keeps what's valuable in psychoanalysis while discarding what science has disproven. The tragedy is that most psychoanalysts don't do this work. They study Freud and Lacan and Jung, but they don't read papers on genetics, neuroscience, or cognitive psychology. They remain trapped in outdated frameworks, speaking a language that feels increasingly disconnected from how we actually understand the brain and behavior. And this is pushing psychoanalysis towards pseudoscience, not because the original ideas were bad, but because the field refuses to evolve. Consider this perspective. If you want to be a great orthopedic surgeon, you don't necessarily need to understand psychology. You can be excellent at fixing broken bones with limited knowledge of the mind. But to be a truly effective psychologist or psychoanalyst, you need to understand biology, neuroscience, genetics, behavior, cognition, and emotion. You need to integrate knowledge across multiple disciplines. The human mind is not just one thing. It's the product of billions of years of evolution, complex neural networks, chemical processes, and lived experience. Yet psychology training often lacks rigorous scientific methodology. Students aren't taught how to properly test hypotheses, how falsifiability works, or why distinguishing science from non-science matters. Medical doctors receive poor epistemological training too. They read studies and apply treatments, but they don't think deeply about the philosophy of knowledge, about error margins, about why medicines work for some people and not others. This educational failure is creating a crisis. Psychoanalysis, which could be a valuable framework for understanding subjective human experience, is instead becoming an isolated field that speaks only to itself, that rejects external evidence, that treats criticism as attack rather than opportunity for growth. Within 20 or 30 years, if this continues, psychoanalysis will be indistinguishable from astrology or homeopathy, a discredited system that once had promise but refused to adapt. But it doesn't have to be this way. Psychoanalysis can acknowledge its limits while embracing its strengths. It can say, we're not a hard science, and that's okay. We work in the realm of subjective experience, of meaning-making, of how people understand their own minds. We can integrate findings from neuroscience and psychology without abandoning our core insights about the complexity of human consciousness. The real question isn't whether psychoanalysis is science. It's whether psychoanalysis can remain relevant and useful in a world where we understand the brain better than ever before. Can it evolve? Can it learn? Or will it ossify into irrelevance, another historical curiosity that refused to adapt to new knowledge? The answer depends entirely on the next generation of practitioners, on whether they're willing to study broadly, think critically, and hold their cherished theories up to the harsh light of evidence. Because ultimately, what matters isn't protecting Freud's legacy. What matters is actually helping people understand themselves and live better lives. And that requires humility, curiosity, and a willingness to admit when century-old ideas need updating.